The following broadcast is a presentation of Mount Zion Media Ministry.
Simply this, a declaration of love. I said to you last time I was here 2 weeks ago that we needed to make a declaration of dependence, which means rather than celebrating the 4th saying that we were independent, that we believers needed to declare our dependence upon God. And today I stopped by to tell us that we need to make a declaration of our love for God. What do I mean by declaration? I believe that all of us as believers need to stand, need to sit in private, in public, and declare that we love God. We need to declare, to proclaim it out of our mouths that we love God. And the declaration that we make will not just be empty words, but that those words would have meaning behind them. Let me give you an earthly example, and then I'm going to move to the heavenly. Because all of us have a part of God's nature in us, and God is love. Every one of us has the need to be loved. And we want to feel that love expressed, but we also want the people we love to declare their love for us. Am I right about it? Every child longs for a declaration from their parents of love. Can I just be transparent for a moment and say that I thank God for a mother who was able to express and declare her love to all 12 of her children. But I had a daddy, on the other hand, who was not free in that way. And so I grew up as a boy longing to have my daddy declare in my hearing, I love you. And not just me, but all of my siblings. And so if he brought a gift home or we got a toy for Christmas, and I was saying under my breath, Daddy, I'm glad you brought that, but what I really need is for you to say that you love me. I had to wait until I was a grown man to hear that, but can I tell you, those were the 3 most powerful words that he ever spoke to me. He told me he was pleased with me, proud of me, happy about me, but the most powerful words he ever said came to me when I got grown, that he loved me. And so I'm saying that I suspect there's some other folk in here like me who got a parent, a dad, a mother, and you too miss that declaration of love that you needed to affirm you. Maybe that's not your story. How many of you in here been in love or in love? Don't you want a declaration from your lover? Have you seen those movies or pictures on television when somebody's in love with somebody and they say it, but the other person never says it, and like they be begging for it? Well, you know, I'm not like that, and then they try to bait you in it. How do you feel about me? Oh, you know how I feel. No, I don't. Tell me. How do you? Because what you want to hear is that declaration of love. You long for it, and isn't it kind of funny how some of us, some of you, me, you, when we are first in love, when we first start out, we are very free with that declaration. But after a while, people have to beg you for it. And then you say, well, don't you know? Yeah, I know. But I just want to hear the declaration. I love you. But I pay the bills. I want to hear. I love you. Because those are some powerful words, especially when they are backed with meaning in the lives of people. And let me tell you something. They are important to God. A lawyer, religious lawyer, came to Jesus one day. Jesus, I got a question. Out of all the commandments, you gave 10 to Moses on Mount Sinai. And we lawyers who are part of the Sanhedrin Council, we have added 613 to that. So there are 623 laws. Out of all 623, which is the most important? And Jesus responded by saying, this is the first and the greatest commandment. You shall love the Lord, your God, with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. That's the greatest one. Why would God proclaim that as the greatest commandment? I tell you why. Because it's important to him. Love me with all of your heart. You know what the heart represents in the Bible? The seat of emotion and will. So if you can't say you can't love God emotionally, then you're not loving God right, because the heart represents the place of emotion. And the will is there because emotionally, that word emotion, emotive, the motor or the motive to do something may be there. But if I don't have the will, I won't do it. Because I got free will, I can do it or not do it. And so the will pushes me. And so God said, I need you to love me with emotion, and I need you to make a choice with your will to demonstrate that love. And then he says, with all your mind, because I need you not to be dumb when you love me, but thinking when you love me. I want you to think about who I am. Love me because of who I am. Think about what I've done for you. Love me with your mind. And as you love on me, use your mind to be creative in loving on me. All your soul, that's that person on the inside, the real you that can't be seen. There's somebody in us. This body just housed the real person. And so with everything in you, my soul, bless the Lord, oh my soul, and all that is within me, bless his name. Get that person out of you. And love him from that perspective. And then with your strength, that refers to your body. Put your body in it. Throw your arms around me. Love on me with your body, with the strength that you have been given. And so God said, that's the greatest commandment. And here's all God is saying, that's what I need from you most. Let me make some folk in here mad. God, this is what that verse means in the context of all of God's laws. God says, my major concern is not whether you're straight or gay. I don't care about your sexuality until I know whether or not you love me. I don't care. I don't care if you're a liar or you tell the truth. My first thing is from you, I want to know if you love me. Pastor Simmons, how do you say that? Peter denied him 3 times, and all of the disciples, they denied him and walked away. And you look in the Gospel of John, when the Lord got ready to reinstate him, he said to Peter, do you love me? Lord, you know I love you. 2nd time, do you love me? You know. 3rd time, Peter, do you love me? You know. Then feed my sheep. Peter walked away from being a disciple of Jesus Christ. And God reinstated him, and the only question he had, do you love me? He never asked him about his denial. He never asked the rest of them about their denial. To reinstate them, his only question was, do you love me? Because if you love me, I can fix the rest of it. But I can't deal with you until I know you love me. And so he wants us to love him. But come close to me. He doesn't want us to be closet lovers. He wants you to love him and to declare your love for him. And that's what the psalmist did. David, the author of this psalm, in Psalm 116, he declares his love. And so in verse 1, if you will, David makes a declaration of his love for God. David says, I love the Lord. Those four powerful words, I love the Lord. Well, Pastor Simmons, that's David. What does that have to do with me? I'm so glad you asked. Psalm 116 is what's called a messianic song. And by messianic song, it means that the Hebrew people used that song during the Passover celebration. Passover is equal to our Easter. And so Passover means that they sung it at a time when they were celebrating the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus Christ for us Christians, and for the Hebrews, when God delivered them from captivity in Egypt, when he passed over them because of the blood of the Lamb, and they were delivered, and the firstborn died. And they were set free from captivity. And so David wrote this psalm as a personal song for him. But because the Hebrew people saw in it a similarity to their deliverance from Egyptian bondage and life itself, because everybody shared an experience that I'm going to talk about in a minute that David had. And so while David wrote it personally, it became a corporate song for everybody because we all share the same experience. Now that may not have made sense to you, but I'm going to help you with that in a minute. And so David wrote it for himself, but the whole congregation would sing it. And they would be gathered in worship, and they would say, not to themselves, but they would break out in song and declare, I love the Lord. I don't speak Hebrew or Greek, but what I do is I study the writings of people who did so that I could understand the context of the Bible, as I told the 8 o'clock crowd, because if I preach without context, I'm conning you. And I don't want to be a con artist when I preach. And so the Hebrew rendering of this passage suggests that when they said, I love the Lord, that it was full of emotion and devotion. To quote my grandmama, who didn't know Hebrew, not Greek, she said they weren't dry. It wasn't a dry, I love you. They were not singing as if the song meant nothing to them. You ever seen folk in the choir? They're singing, for example, this joy I have, the world didn't give it to me. And they just stand there. This joy I have, the world didn't give it. The world came. Okay, then they sit down. You ever sing, victory is mine, victory is mine, victory today is mine. And they got this look of defeat all over their face. There's a disconnect between what they're singing and what they look like. Break it down, Pastor Simmons. It's a disconnect when that brother, that sister tell you they love you. But you know when it's just words. See, y'all, see now, the 8 o'clock crowd, I could just say it and move on, but it take y'all a minute, so let me help you out. Okay, y'all got it, all right. And so when he said, I love you, meaning said it with power. And again, David wrote this for his private devotion, but it became part of the public worship, and he declared it openly. And it's a part of the Hebrew people's worship. Worship included a declaration of love for God. And I submit to you today, as I prepare to move to my next point, that we need to declare our love for him. And to make sure that you don't miss it. To make sure that you get some practice. I need to know right now. I need to know who's in the house. those folk who are present today and you love the Lord, I want you now, not when you get home, not next week, but right now, in the company of the folk that's in here, those folk who are watching over the internet, to open your mouth, let me hear you, and declare your love for God. Tell him that you love him. I love the Lord. I love the Lord. Can't say anything for anybody else, but as for me, I love the Lord. And I don't care who else knows it. I love the Lord. Don't care who's sitting beside me. Don't care if they don't open their mouth, but I love the Lord. I've been to the crack house. I've been to the White House. And everywhere in between. And in every house I'm in. I'm not ashamed. In fact, I count it a privilege. I want everybody to know that I love the Lord. When I was a young boy, I became a Mason for a minute. And as soon as I was raised from a dead level to a perpendicular, I wanted everybody to know that I was a Mason. I was standing on squares and dropping signs and rubbing people's hands, trying to find out where they were. Because I wanted folk to know that I'm a man now. How many of you really want folk to know? How many of your coworkers, if somebody called for a reference and they said, do they love the Lord? Do you have any evidence other than they say they are a member of Mount Zion that they love the Lord? I submit to you that folk around you on your job everywhere ought to know because you have declared it. And I love myself some Jesus. Listen. So there's this declaration of his love. But then David gives an explanation. And this explanation is what becomes the common experience of everybody. Listen at what David says. David says, I love the Lord because he heard my voice and my supplications. In other words, David is saying, I cried out to the Lord and he heard me. I made supplications, plural, which means I repeatedly took some stuff to the Lord. And supplications has to do with some specific things that I took to the Lord, and I took them to him more than one time. And then, if you will, look at verses 3 and 4, and David starts there, and he continues. He shares some of the highlights of some of what his experience was and the reason he had to call on the Lord. He says, the sorrows of death compassed me. In other words, I was in a situation and I was surrounded by trouble and tribulation, and that thing was so heavy on me, I thought I was going to die. And so David describes the situation as death itself, and so David is fearful in this situation. And then he says, and the pains of hell got hold upon me. Metaphoric language that said it looked like hell had hands that reached out to inflict pain on me and got a hold of me, and I couldn't shake loose from it. Then he says, I found trouble and sorrow. Anybody ever found trouble and sorrow? And so as the people listen at what David wrote personal, they began to identify with it, and you say, you know what? I've had some experiences too. Some experiences when I thought I couldn't make it. Some experiences that troubled me, that caused me to be in sorrow, that caused me to be in pain. I've had situations where stuff got a hold of me. And baby, I thought I'd never break free or come out of what I was going through. And then what I decided to do is I cried out unto the Lord. I didn't whisper out, but I cried out. Y'all know the difference between a whisper and a cry, right? And listen, look if you will, because sometimes we get confused. Because look at verse 4. Sometimes when we cry out, we think our prayer got to be 20 minutes for God to answer. But see, when you're in a real tight, you ain't got time for no eloquence. You ain't got time to go home and study your prayer and write it out and erase it about 10 times to make sure all of everything is, you ain't got time for that. David said in verse 4, then I called upon the Lord, and this is all I said, "O Lord, I beseech thee, deliver my soul." Plain like, God, you got to help me. And I submit today that there's a common experience in this place. I know it's Sunday morning, and I know you in Mount Zion, and I know you trying to, put on your front, but baby, let's be real. If you've been living just a little while, you had some situations. And like David, you've had to cry out to the Lord. And it wasn't no long, drawn-out prayer. Sometimes it was just, "Lord, help me. Lord, have mercy on me. Lord, if you don't help me, I don't know what in the world I'm going to do." And sometimes you couldn't even put two words together, and so you just said, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." What's wrong? Jesus. What? Jesus. Jesus. And the reason you call on him, because somewhere in your past, you heard the old folks say, if you call him, he'll answer. And so Jesus, 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 Jesus. And so David said, that was my situation, and I called him, and then look back again at verse 2 and see what David said the Lord did. And David said, when I called him, as I give my explanation, you see that the explanation includes the testimony. And so you ought to have your little testimony to give your explanation of why you love the Lord. And so David says, when I cried out, he had inclined his ear unto me. Y'all, I got to help you. I got to help you. because again, it's the Hebrew language, and here it is. The Hebrew people saw God as this God high and lifted up. That's why Isaiah said, when I saw him high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Train represented his power. He's this lifted up God. He's this powerful God. He's a holy God. Moses said he's so holy, when I realized I was talking to him, I took my shoes off, because the ground I was on was holy ground. They had this belief that you couldn't even look at the face of God, because if you did, you would die. They had this belief that God does not attend to poor, humble human beings, because we don't deserve to be in God's presence. But look at what he inclined his ear to me. The language suggests that God is in heaven. But when they cried, God got up and he leaned down and put his ear to their mouth so he could hear it. In other words, God stooped down from where he was to come to where I was in order to hear me. And you let me help you. I told y'all my 8 o'clock crowd would have got it. And so he's saying to us in God's body language, God was showing not only did he hear me, but he was so concerned about me that he wanted to make sure that I understood that he heard me. Let me break it down. I asked y'all a minute, how many of y'all been in love? You have, when you go to the restaurant, check it out. You see a couple. They can be married, they can be dating. You see them sitting at the table having dinner. And so they're sitting there, the man on one side, the woman on one side. And they're sitting there and they're eating. They place the order. And while they're waiting on the order, they're just sitting there looking around in there. He may get his phone, she may get her phone. She playing a game. He looking at girls, and she just looking up in there. And then every now and then they have a conversation and they have to talk loud because he leaning so far back and she leaning so far back they can't hear what I'm saying. They don't want everybody in the place to know. Say, can you speak up? But you could tell by their body language. Ain't much happening there. Ain't nobody got to tell you. You don't even have to know their name, but you could tell ain't nothing happening. But baby, check that couple out. They at the table. He done pulled that chair up close as he could get. She pulled that chair up close as she could. He leaned in, she leaned in, and they just whispering. They hear each other. They just talking. Somebody walked by, they don't even see him because he's looking in her eyes, and he noticed the color of her eyes. He noticed them eyelashes she got on the other day. And she noticing that dye he done put in his hair and in his mustache. And she ain't gonna tell him now because she don't want to bust the mood, but she gonna tell him, baby, you messed up. You got some of that black stuff. And they'll just lean in and just talking, and then the food comes, and he says, "Oh, baby, this is so good. You want to taste?" He puts them on his fork, and she tasted off his, and then she gets some of you. That's good. And then she said, "Here, taste this right here." She put it. He lean over there, and he act like he like it, even if it don't. And no. But the body language says that they into each other. And so the language said he inclined. He didn't recline. He inclined. He came into me. And David says, look, see, I need you to look at verse 4. And so then he tells us what happened. He said, and then I called upon the name of the Lord and I prayed. And then the other verse tells us in verse 2 that he heard me. He inclined to my voice, my cries, my supplications. And David said, because he's done that, I love him. And there's some other stuff in there he said, but basically David begins to talk about all the things that God has done for him. And so he loves him because of that. And let me just ask you a question. Has God done anything for you? That's a reason to love him. And for the one or two who don't think that the Lord has done anything for you, you won't admit that you had some situations. Let me drop this off. He still did something for you without your cry. John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life.
Thanks for watching. Be blessed and continue walking in the light.